The basics of Mendelian genetics are centered around dominant recessive genes, and an allele is simply a variation of one particular gene. Dominant alleles show up in a person as long as one dominant allele is present. On the other hand, recessive alleles are exhibited only if they exist without the presence of dominant alleles. As you can see in this example, either one or two dominant alleles will produce a certain physical trait, brown eyes in this case. But the only case where a person can have blue eyes is when two recessive alleles are paired together.
Firstly, we will discuss multiple allelism. Multiple allelism is when two or more genes code for a specific phenotypical trait. The reason it is not Mendelian is that multiple alleles can all contribute to the same phenotypical trait. For example, we could look at hair color, where the mom has light brown hair with possibly a blonde and a brown allele, and the father has red hair with two red alleles. In this situation, the children can get an array of different hair colors depending on the various alleles that they receive from their parents.
Another example of a non-Mendelian inheritance pattern is incomplete dominance. This is where a heterozygote of a species possesses a phenotype somewhere in between the phenotypes of the two homozygotes, because neither trait is fully dominant. In Mendelian genetics, if C were dominant, a heterozygous organism would look the same as the dominant homozygous organism, CC. In this pattern, neither trait is fully dominant, so CS doesn't look quite like CC or SS.
Another potential inheritance pattern is codominance. Where incomplete dominance produces a phenotype that is between two extremes, codominance allows both extremes to be expressed at the same time. An example of codominance in humans is blood type. Someone with an AB blood type would have both A and B blood cells, as the alleles that code for both A and B are dominant.
In some cases, traits are determined by alleles that operate in an on-off fashion. However, in other cases, alleles operate quantitatively. Instead of there being two or more distinct phenotypes, phenotypes are distributed over a wide range. One common example of this is height. People are not either short or tall. Technically, there are infinite heights possible. This is due to something called polygenic inheritance, in which some trait is coded for by several different individual genes. In the case of height specifically, however, observed phenotypical range is actually the result of multifactorial inheritance. Multifactorial inheritance is similar to polygenic, but it includes environmental impacts as well as several genes. If an individual is malnourished, for example, they will tend to be shorter than their genes coded for otherwise. Although it may seem counterintuitive for non-genetic factors to have any impact on traits that are genetically coded for, it is in fact the case.
The basics of Mendelian genetics are important to understand. The observations Gregor Mendel made govern some of the most fundamental aspects of inheritance, and Punnett squares are a vital tool for analyzing simple inheritance patterns. However, these key concepts are limited in their ability to explain many patterns seen in real life. Most organisms inherit traits through more complicated means than a simple recessive and dominant system. Life on Earth is complex, and it makes sense that the rules that govern the existence of life would be complicated too.